Hello, welcome to this session on the new frontier in tech. It has been a tumultuous couple of years, and in that time, technology has been advancing incredibly rapidly. I'm joined by a panel of 4 fantastic guests, and we're going to discuss where this is leading us and how fast we should be moving. So I'm just going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, but starting with you, Michelle Scarborough, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks very much, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. My name is Michelle Scarborough. I am with BDC Capital. I represent and am the managing partner of the Women in Technology Venture Fund at BDC. For those of you who don't know, BDC is the bank for entrepreneurs, and we provide support to about 62,000 entrepreneurs across Canada with financial services, advisory, and smart capital, which is the area of business that I'm in. So, large investor across the country, dedicated to investing in women-led technology companies, and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Tarek Amin, could you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Pleasure being with you here today. I am Tarek Amin. I'm the group CTO for Rakuten and the CEO of Rakuten Symphony. Rakuten is a large internet company based out of Japan, Tokyo, and we're focused on a diversified set of technologies from e-commerce to banking to fintech, and most recently, Rakuten entered a new frontier, launching the world first end-to-end virtualized mobile infrastructure in Japan. Thank you very much for allowing me to come today.
Thank you very much, Tarek. Thierry Dassault, could you introduce yourself, please?
With pleasure. Thank you for your invitation. I am Thierry Dassault from the group industrial Marcel Dassault. The principal and historical activity is the aviation with military aircraft, the Rafale, and the business jet Falcon. We have also the Figaro and Dassault system, with a huge company and who was implicated for the vaccine, because Dassault system about Medidata 12 or 80 months ago.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Dassault. And Stéphane Malvoisin, turning to you.
Good morning, everyone, and it's definitely a pleasure to be here in Montreal on site after a year and a half being in the US and not being able to come to Canada. So very happy to be with you. I'm with GardaWorld, which is one of the largest security company and risk management company in the world. We employ more than 120,000 employees worldwide. And in my senior vice president role, I'm in charge of the strategic partnerships with a strong focus on innovations and actionable innovation that we can mobilize in our company for our clients.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. Okay, my first question to the panel is, obviously, as I've said, we've been through this incredibly rapid digital transformation. But I'd be very keen to hear your views on what you think the most interesting technologies that have emerged over the course of the pandemic, and what do you think the technologies will be that will outlast the pandemic and really be a legacy for the future? Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we could spend a whole panel talking about that. But I think, the first thing I think we all need to remember is that technology's been in our lives for a while, but what's happened through the pandemic is an acceleration of that technology. So things that we were playing with at the very beginning of the pandemic have now become part of our daily lives. And we're seeing that disruption from kind of the top down, infrastructure right through to how we operate as human beings, right through to how we work with our employees and how we work with our partners and our other colleagues across the country and across the world. So if you think about what's disrupted and what's transformed and how we've transformed with it, it's happened at all levels. Smart cities and transportation are being disrupted. Cybersecurity, I know Stefan will probably talk about this in more detail, but cybersecurity is a huge challenge and at the forefront of what we're looking at right now in terms of disruptive technologies and emerging technologies. Everything to do with supply chain, everything to do with people interaction, and not just the movement of people, but how people actually interact with each other in environments like this, as well as how they interact in their settings, how we recruit, how we retain talent, as that talent now becomes flat and is mobile anywhere in the world through a more hybridized model of work. So I think we're thinking about things very differently. Education also has been completely disrupted, as has the fintech space. We've got a number of banks here, including BDC, and the fintech world has been truly disrupted with many emerging technologies coming into the forefront. And finally, as we think about the health and wellness of our people post-pandemic and how we think about managing our own health and wellness, and the education that goes along with that, and the education of our kids as those kids now come into the world, is going to become vitally important. And finally, and I know this is a huge theme of the conference, but sustainability. How do we get to carbon neutrality? How do we think about sustainable food systems, local to global, infrastructure to support food and food technologies, from advanced protein manufacturing right through to food to table farming. So all things in between.
Thank you, Michelle. I think one interesting thing that you said there, I mean, all of it, of course, I agree with, but the question I have is, we've had this huge disruption, but will there, from this disruption, will we snap back to normality, or do you think we move forward into a different state of behavior? How much of this behavior will be continuous from here? Tarek, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Malcolm, I think, let me give you my perspective. First of all, as Michelle indicated, I think this is not about the creation of new technology segments. We've always had the ability to connect, to communicate, to dialogue with each other, irrespective of where we are. But I think we had to learn how to use these platforms and tools. For me personally, I moved from the US to India to Japan. And the little nuances about cultural awareness, and let me explain what I mean by that. In my US home, I have a very large home in which I have an office I could go to. My kids cannot disturb me. And when I moved to Japan, you'll notice that necessarily the home layout is not really made for remote working, if you will. So our employees in Japan had to figure out how to work, how to disengage between their personal life, their professional life. But I am completely convicted that the old way of working has changed. There must be a new normal, and a new normal in which hybrid work style will come to exist. And many lessons learned for us as we're a very large company. We consider ourselves digital in terms of our communication from well before this issue happened to all of us. But the new working have changed dramatically for us. We love a lot of things about remote working, but we also don't like a lot of things about it. So I am of the opinion that, the way of working of the past is over, and there will be a new normal, and this new normal will be defined. And I don't think today anybody could predict what this new normal is. We're all going to have to figure this out. One last thing I'll tell you from us, I feel that we are extremely a social, emotional, human being is very critical. So finding that balance between having a little bit of the emotions back to our dialogue and our conversation is going to be really critical. And that's the balance within Rakuten that we're trying to do. Offer flexibility to our employees, but at the same time, we don't want to get disengaged from what's really happening, how our employees are feeling. Are they really coping well with being locked at home and so on? So I think it's important to understand there will be somewhere as a hybrid approach between coming physical to the office as well as hybrid working remotely. Okay.
Monsieur Dassault, what do you think will be the legacy of the pandemic?
No, what they say are very interesting, but it's the utilization of video as we do now, and notably with Zoom. Zoom is very easy to use and was very used during the COVID, and it's a big news for everyone and for the people who have to stay at home to work. The other question is what crash? Unfortunately, not the car and the pollution. Maybe the possibility that the people can work outside and don't come, it's good, but not all the week, because there is no more discussion and relationship, and it's important to keep it.
Okay, thank you. Stéphane Malvoisin, should we talk a little bit about cybersecurity and the risk there, as Michel highlighted?
Yes, absolutely. So we do talk, Michel listed a lot of different sectors that are absolutely key and important. I would go back to two, and before we go into the cyber or the wider security, the first one is, our human capital and the impact on the health and the medical sectors, because, we all know now about the vaccine, but the RNA technology has been obviously key to resolve that pandemic, or being used to resolve that pandemic. But this is a great innovation which is going to last and be applied to many other sectors and situations. The fourth question for today is what we get excited about, and this RNA being applied not only to the COVID-19 situation and pandemic, but also to cancer, and there are new treatments coming up on that front. So I think if there is one technology that has been not disruptive, because as you said, it's emerging, it's coming, it's an acceleration, it's not necessarily new, but that is going to have a significant and impact in the next years and 10 years and 20 years or so, is this technology that has been key, and Moderna was the first to say it. This technology was key in order to meet the need for global supply. So again, before we talk about security, I think the main aspect is our people. It's the medical and the health sector, and this is a key technology, and it's going to last for a long time. On the security side, I would cover two different aspects. One is the work from home and evolution, and Tarek indicated that in some countries like us in the US, it's quite comfortable for many of us. It's much less so for other team members. What appeared is, in the past, our focus was very much so on larger cities. And, being based in New York, living in New York, we would cover risk inherent to Manhattan or the main airports and kind of the big center of population. Now that the people are working from home for a vast majority, we need to deliver a more granular approach in terms of intelligence, in terms of risk assessment, and that's being done through AI and machine learning, and that's a big part of our investment in time, in resources, to make sure that we can deliver on a very granular approach, and that is going to stay, because the volume of data that we have to ingest and digest is just cannot be dealt by our team members by themselves. So again, I would put the medical and the health sector on top of any other priority. On the cyber side, we have an evolution in terms of who has access to the level of technology that is required to lead attacks. And in the past, it was very much deterrence from a strong by the strong. We're dealing with Russia and China, basically, or state-sponsored groups. Nowadays, tools are accessible by much, organized crimes and so on. And so it's how do we handle this deterrence by the strong of the mad, and that brings a lot of unpredictability, and this is going to be one of the challenges in the years to come. And I will finish on that point. We have all heard about the ransomwares, and it's broadly covered in the news. I think what keeps many decision makers up at night is the risk of data breach. And we have been investing a lot. When I say investing, it's not only financial resources, but also time looking at innovation in the space of the digital risk protection platforms. The goal being to be able to scan the deep web, the dark web, automatically to discover threats, monitor, and obviously resolve those threats. So that will be my key points on that front.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Malvoisin. I'd just like to keep you talking because you raise a couple of interesting points that will take me into my next question. The first, obviously, is we've had this very fast vaccine program and, this huge scientific breakthrough in such a short period of time. And then also, as you say, many more companies are turning to AI or turning to ways of automating their operations. But really, the advance of AI comes when, at the same time as we're not really sure about the outcomes. We can't really be sure about how AI programs make the decisions they do. I guess my question is, are we moving too quickly? What are the technologies that are going so fast that actually, we need to be a little bit more cautious? Do you have any reason for concern at all?
Yes, actually, I have concerns or in a more active and proactive way, different challenges we need to address. One, as you said, is about, and the entire goal is about being realistic about innovation. And among the challenges, one, as you mentioned on the AI side, we have too much data too fast. And, if we look back at, I went back through the numbers, and if we look between 2016 and 2025, the volume of data that we are acquiring and integrating is multiplied by 10 times. So it's another order of magnitude. And it's not only about accumulating data, it's to be able to find the useful information, insightful knowledge, and that is going to be the challenge on top of the storage, the processing, the sustainability. When you look at the crypto blockchains, the energy that is required to handle all of that processing is very significant. So there is one challenge on too much data too fast. The other one about being realistic about innovation is what I've read about the Moore's curse. We talk about how fast with the Moore's law, the microchips is evolving, doubling its capacity very quickly. But when we look at the more classic energy transportation fundamentals, the gains in performance are not that significant. We're talking about a 1.5 to 3% growth per year. I speak under the authorities of Mr. Dassault, but airliners are not going that fast and faster than before. So there is, managing the expectations, if you will. Some fields will go very fast. Some others will be much slower. And the last piece is what some people call the paradox of automation. And the more efficient the automated system go, the more critical the human factor is going to be in that. We take away through automation of the easy part of the task, and we leave the human being, handling the critical part, and that's going to be a challenge if we, keep the human factors outside of the equation. If we look at a major airliner and major, aircraft manufacturer who had 2 crashes over the last 2 or 3 years. When you go too far in that automation process, very bad things can happen. So again, it's a much more challenging and complex issue. But when you have too much automation, risk may raise as well. So. And the last point I would touch very quickly on is the return to regionalization. Until COVID, we're all talking about globalization and so on. Now people are working from home, they live in their neighborhood, and they want to remain and travel less. So how do we address that?
Okay. I guess it's also a question of communication. Actually, whether there is a widespread acceptance of these technologies in society depends on public understanding of what is going on, and maybe actually capabilities are moving faster than the communication to the wider public. Mr. Amin, do you have any views? Oh, I think you might be on mute, I'm afraid.
I apologize.
It's okay.
I think absolutely a couple of important points to highlight. When we talk about disruptive technology, there's no doubt that AI is a really important and critical technology. And for us, we use it for what I call AI for good. We have mechanism to ensure that we deploy this technology in a way that enhances our life and delivers benefit to our consumers and the enterprises we work with. But I also fear that if AI does not have guardrails, it could be something that we should really think about and worry about in the future. The second thing, when we talk the underlying communication platforms and the connectivity, we have probably one of the most advanced automation framework that we have deployed in Japan by launching our mobile infrastructure. We have AI embedded into this network, but not to replace the human being and the organization that we have in place. We are trying to take the mundane task and have our human capital focus on critical activities, critical software development to enhance the underlying connectivity layer to deliver a flawless broadband experience to the masses. So I do think that, from my view, that the technology is absolutely advancing far faster than our ability to communicate about these breakthroughs, and finding the right balance on how we translate the benefits, but at the same time, put the guardrails around. For me, I really, really think that this issue about AI is not talked about enough yet. I think we started to heal glimpses of what is possible and what could happen, but it's already a bit too late now, and we need to figure out a way of how to really prepare ourselves in a day in which this world will definitely have AI and human beings working side by side, and hopefully we'll have a lot more mechanism to protect of what AI could evolve in the future to be.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Dassault, do you have any views on whether we're moving at the right speed?
Je vais m'exprimer en français parce que sinon je cherche mes mots, c'est un peu trop long, mais Monsieur Malvoisin m'a cité à quel sujet, en fait, par rapport aux avions de ligne, des choses comme ça?
Oui, je faisais juste une remarque en disant que dans le domaine des technologies, effectivement, les gains de performance sont exponentiels, mais que dans d'autres industries, et je prenais l'exemple des avions de ligne, les gains de performance étaient absolument pas significatifs en termes de vitesse, par exemple. C'était juste une comparaison pour dire que des technologies évoluaient très vite et d'autres n'avaient pas forcément des gains de performance significatifs.
D'accord, mais on fait pas plus d'avions de ligne, mais votre remarque sur les technologies, oui. J'imagine que vous avez pensé au 737 MAX,
tout à fait,
qui avait un système novateur. Alors, il faut savoir que pour des raisons, je pense, d'économie, les réacteurs ont à la fois été plus gros mais mal placés en équilibre, qu'il y avait un logiciel qui faisait baisser ou, je sais pas, où monter l'avion. Mais surtout, le pire, c'est que l'interrupteur pour arrêter ce pilotage automatique était à 1 mètre derrière le siège. Vous voyez? Donc ça, c'est un peu bête. Je reviens juste sur on a beaucoup parlé des vaccins, donc j'ai dit effectivement que Dassault Systèmes avait racheté Medidata. C'était forcément une formidable opportunité. Et je voudrais rappeler 2 chiffres, c'est-à-dire que normalement, un vaccin nécessite une dizaine d'années pour être au point. Et avec Medidata, ils ont mis, Moderna notamment, effectivement, et Pfizer ont mis 9 mois. Il n'y a pas photo. Alors après, il peut toujours y avoir des problèmes d'incompatibilité, mais il n'y a pas eu 20 000 morts, vous voyez ce que je veux dire. Et ça, c'est quand même une chose très importante, en sachant qu'évidemment, vous l'avez remarqué, les variants font que le vaccin d'aujourd'hui doit s'adapter aux variants de demain, ce qui n'est pas forcément évident. Et là, on parle de 3e dose, je ne sais pas, au Canada, au Québec, où on en est. Donc, votre question était plus sur une continuité de réflexion. Vous pouvez me la rappeler, s'il vous plaît, en français?
Malcolm, that's a good.
I'm not sure I can say it in French, but I can say it in English and perhaps a translation.
On a des traductrices à gogo. Elles sont où?
My question is simply, we're talking about this wave of automation and the wave of companies trying to implement AI solutions. And my question is simply, is it going at the right speed? Are there any potential problems that companies should consider?
D'accord, donc ça c'est très intéressant, c'est l'intelligence artificielle. Montréal est devenu un grand centre de réflexion et de, si je puis dire, d'études sur l'intelligence artificielle. Depuis que l'intelligence artificielle nous est revenue, je cite toujours ce film qui, malheureusement, j'espère, ne sera pas véridique. C'est Terminator. Donc évidemment, il n'est pas question que les robots prennent le pouvoir. Maintenant, si on prend l'intelligence artificielle sur les voitures, je crois notamment Tesla, là, il y a eu quelques accidents. Et je cite cet exemple où la voiture, c'est pas Tesla ou une autre, voit un panneau stop, donc elle s'arrête, et le panneau stop se déplace de 3 mètres, la voiture suit. En fait, le panneau était sur le dos d'un ouvrier. Tout ça pour dire qu'on peut pas, de toute façon, tout prévoir. Et on parle déjà de voitures totalement autonomes où on va tourner les sièges dans l'autre sens et jouer aux cartes peut-être. Et la voiture va continuer toute seule. Donc, je pense que l'intelligence artificielle est importante, mais ça demande une surveillance et une sécurité d'action importante. Dernier point, je crois que j'ai vu sur les radios, on a beaucoup parlé au niveau médical de possibilité d'avoir évidemment un fichier de milliers de radios, on va dire, d'un genou ou d'un coude, et on va voir s'il y a une fracture, on va comparer tout ça, mais la machine s'est déjà trompée, donc il faut faire attention.
Okay. Thank you very much, Monsieur Dassault. Michel, turning to you, I think Monsieur Dassault raises an interesting point here, which is it takes quite a long time for regulators to catch up with a lot of these very exciting industries where, you know, we see the promise of self-driving cars or you know, other things racing ahead of the ability of countries or authorities to be able to work out how to make sure that they're safe and regulated. When you're looking at startups, is that something that you're conscious of, or do you look at just the promise?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of both, right? We're looking at what this technology is capable of doing in terms of its change, and you know, fundamentally, all of the technologies that are being created now are created with the intention that they've got AI enablement in them, or machine learning, or some variation on the theme. So I think we've moved away from data, and now it's how do we, to Van's point, how do we leverage that data in terms of actionable ways in which we can use it to make good decisions. So when we're looking at technology companies, we're thinking about what is the speed by which the adoption will actually occur, what regulations, if it's in healthcare or digital health, what would be the regulations pursuant to adoption of that technology. We have a number of digital health companies in our portfolio right now, Swift Medical, Amacathera, Imagia Technologies, which is based in Montreal, all of them taking artificial intelligence and adopting that to create good outcomes and decisions, but with a need to make sure that the regulators are aware. So we're constantly looking at that in terms of how we manage risk with respect to an investment, but we're also looking at if we can overcome the hurdle of the risk, what is the likely customer base going to look like, and will companies adopt the technology to do things better, to do process improvements, or so that we get self-driving automation and logistics sorted out for Wabi is in our portfolio, which is self-driving long-haul trucking automation using artificial intelligence and so on. But how do we manage that, and then how do we help the companies work with the end user, their ultimate customer, like the gentlemen that are on this call, in order to co-create the adoption, as opposed to you build it in the lab and you hope that somebody's going to buy it. So the hybrid go forward for technology innovation and adoption is going to be also a coming together of the innovators as well as the customer base in order to create things that will have a lasting impact for both adoption and for ultimate use in our world as we think about what our world is going to look like, and frankly, what we can create. The opportunity is ours to create a future that we all want to live in, and not something that is fabricated because we weren't thinking.
Absolutely. Do you think that autonomous trucks are going to get there ahead of autonomous cars?
I'm making a few bets.
Well, why do you think they have the advantage?
Well, I think, I can only use the case of Wabi as an example, but their ability to create simulation, leveraging, the good LiDAR technology that's out there right now, and their ability to bring both of those things together in a seamless technology stack is different than some of the tools, let's say, that are in play right now. And there's an opportunity, I think, for them to change the way in which self-driving automation is handled. We are interested in the long haul space because, there's, I'll say it this way, there are some potential, there's always going to be risk, but the risk reward could be potentially less in a long haul situation versus, I don't think infrastructure yet is ready for us all to be necessarily involved in self-driving automation to the degree in which in our brains we would love to be. I think George Jetson, I think we'd all love to be flying around, but or some of us would be, but I think we've got, to earlier points, balanced deployment, balanced and steady testing in order to make sure that we manage risk appropriately and we keep, everyone safe as we move towards these big step changes. We're talking about big step changes in terms of the use of technology, artificial intelligence, and automation in all of the things that we do in our lives.
I want to come now to skills and talent, and I want to come to you first, Mr. Amin, because you have built, as you said, a totally different sort of mobile network in Japan. And I just wanted to ask you, how easy was it to find people to do that? I mean, it seems to me that everywhere I read, there are shortages of engineers, there are shortages of people with the sort of digital skills that everybody wants, and, they're in high demand. How easy was it for you to find the right sort of staff?
Oh, absolutely not simple, not easy whatsoever. In fact, let me just give you a glimpses of the story. I moved to Tokyo in 2018, and, the concept that we tried to create, as elegant as people perceive our underlying infrastructure for connectivity is today, we believe that we have a better way of how to deploy a very affordable, software-driven architecture, cloud-architected mobile infrastructure, which was a first in its kind. Now, to enable this, frankly speaking, I never thought that this is a technology issue. I mean, we've been putting our application workloads in the clouds for more than decades now. So the idea of moving telco workloads to cloud wasn't necessarily the complex task for us at Rakuten. The more complex one, where do you find the right mindset? That was a really challenging one. And so we took a really interesting approach, and we looked at the problem as not local, but a global challenge. I met with my human capital organization, and I gave them a challenge. I said, the world is a beautiful thing. Now we are very much connected. This is pre-COVID, by the way, and I started sending them all over the world to recruit from anywhere and everywhere talent could be had. So in a period of 13 months, we've been able to move about 54 nationalities and their families to Tokyo. We're able to do that because Rakuten did something that was substantially significant, that it made English its spoken language in the office. It facilitated really easy onboarding process and for our future employees. But I will tell you the process of seeking the right talent, and it's not, again, about necessarily always the skill sets of the talent. You are always looking for that mindset, a mindset that is not willing, that is not hindered by the past, that's willing to unlearn, that's looking at opportunities to disrupt. This was really complicated. It was not easy at all, but luckily we found that this world has just brilliant minds We just needed to reach parts of this world that nobody wanted to go to. And that's what we offered and furnished, is an ability to welcome graciously anybody that has the right talent, willing to take this challenge to help us build what we have done in Japan. And for me, I always say our biggest advantage is not about greenfield mobile operator, but the greenfield mindsets that we've been able to onboard during this journey. Not easy, but looking and reflecting back now, I think we've learned a lot about how to attract talent that are willing to come for such disruptions and big projects, similar to the one that Rakuten have taken in Japan.
Okay, thank you very much. Monsieur Malvoisin, how do you attract the people with the right mindset and the right skills? And, are you in competition with your fellow panelists here?
Not in competition with my fellow panelists, but in competition with very large companies, Google and Microsoft. I think it's very, as Tarek said, it's very, very challenging when you look at the amount of investment that the Google and the Microsoft plan, just to name two in the cyberspace, mean to invest in the next 5 to 10 years. We are not just in the same space and the same scale. They're talking about 10, 20 billions of within the next 5 years, just to secure the software supply chain, and so it's just another scale. So to your point, it's security requires to build trust with our customer, and it's not only about finding good talent. It's also about talent retention, which is a big challenge now in the world we live in. And so we have been working with key partners, the EY of the world, to look at what our talent workforce is looking for. And it's not only about remote location, it's also about the flexibility of their scheduling. So we're trying to adjust. The good thing is we have a global workforce. We are present in many countries in very different areas, in some high threat zones as well, in the Middle East and Africa. So I think agility is part of our DNA, but still it's very challenging. If I may just to go back 1 second on 1 minute on the previous topic, something we did not mention, and hearing Mr. Dassault and Michel, we did not mention the ethical dimension in the choices that we'll have to go through in the coming years. And I was speaking with students at McGill University a few months ago, and they were telling me in the engineering side, they had ethical course, and I was kind of surprised. And I asked why, and they said, it's kind of a good example is when we talk about automation, and Mr. Dassault took the car example of the stop sign. But what if you are facing a challenge where you have pedestrians and you have passengers in the car? What is the machine going to decide? Are you going to kill the pedestrians, or are you going in order to protect the passenger, or the other way around? And I think we're going to be facing a lot of these concrete choices. And to Michel's point, it's going to be a matter of finding the right balance between what the technology brings and what the end consumer want to see in their real life.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important point. Michel, coming to you though on innovation, well, obviously if you'd like to talk a little bit about ethics, that would be great. But my question on innovation is big tech still sucking up all the talent? Is that the place to be, or is the innovation happening elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I do want to touch on the ethical piece just for a second too, because I think, at the end of the day, technology and innovation is intended to do something better. It's intended to better some process and create some improvement. So I don't think that we ever want to be. I think we have a duty and an obligation as investors and as people to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable to a high standard, and make sure that what we're doing, and certainly this is our practice, is to make sure that what we're doing and what we're investing in is ethical, and is that the people that are creating it and deploying it and the people that are buying it are holding themselves to that highest standard of integrity and honesty also. Because at the end of the day, technology is all about making our lives better, our companies' lives better. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to the people. And when you think about who's grabbing all the talent and where the talent is going and so on. All of our companies right now, we have 35 companies in our portfolio in aggregate. We have many of them looking for engineering talent, data scientists, and so on, along with heads of HRs, CFOs, finance people, and salespeople, and all of them are hard to find at all of the levels of the organization. So there is a healthy competitive spirit happening in the marketplace right now for talent. But I think what we need to remember is that there are also a lot of people that are looking to become part of this technology wave, part of this new evolution. We have a company in the portfolio called Uvaro. What they do is they retrain people in the retail space who maybe were a cook or a waiter or a waitress, and they take those people and they retrain them to be salespeople in SaaS-based high-growth enterprise companies that are looking to build global businesses. And the talent that's coming out of that organization is amazing. So we're seeing this more and more boot camp style to retrain talent, more in-house talent. To Stefan, to your point about retention, more in-house talent retention mechanisms, training, education, skills development. Hybridized work models that suit the millennials, which are coming into the workforce en masse, in order to kind of help that. So, but we're going to see a need for us to also be flexible as business owners, big corporations, et cetera, in order to make sure that talent is going to stay. And to Tarek's point, culturally, want to be there, culturally want to be an ambassador for the company that they're working for in order to go down that road. And I'll say one more thing and then I'll stop. But the other piece of this that I think we need to remember is that the way in which we operate now, even though there is a regionalization of I want to stay in my space, I want to do local things, there is a recognition that we are a diverse culture and that the world is a diverse place. So I think it would be a missed opportunity not to talk for a moment about diversity and to make sure that we are all thinking about not just do we have the right talent in terms of skill set, but do we have the right diversity of that talent at the table that is representative of our customers and our marketplace, particularly as we think globally as well as locally, and making sure that women and other underrepresented minorities are included in all of that, I think is a huge, one of the things we really saw in the pandemic that came about was a recognition that diversity mattered, a recognition that inclusion mattered at all levels of an organization. So no matter what technology you're adopting, no matter what rate you're adopting that technology, the people and the diversity of the people and that talent are going to be critical to your success, no matter what.
Well, I was going to ask you about this, Michelle, because actually this is where the two sides, ethics and skills, intersect, right? Because as Mr. Malvoisin said, right, the computer programs simply reflect the people who built those computer programs, and we know that the tech industry is not really hugely reflective of broader society. So it's not really reflective of the society whose products it's consuming. So my question to you is, how do you change that, given that it's now been how many decades, and you still have a certain sort of person studying for tech qualifications, and you have a skills base that is its own group, right?
Yeah, well, you change it by leading by example, first of all. And so tone at the top, is a part of how you govern that. If you've got leadership that, says, look, we need to have diversity in our teams, and this is what that diversity could look like, then you start implementing policies around that. The universities are doing a much better job, I would suggest, of growing talent and providing opportunities for women and underserved minorities in classes, in engineering, in science, but also cross-pollinating people that have, maybe backgrounds in the art, to think about what it would be like in business and to take that creative mind and apply it to a business problem, or take that creative mind and apply it in conjunction with someone in engineering so that they can identify what might come about as a result of their combined efforts. So there's a lot of that that's starting to happen. It's still fairly new, but it is a matter of leading by example. Our fund was set up specifically for that purpose, and to start having conversations, which we've been having for the last 4 years, around diversity, the inclusion of women in the C-suite as founders of companies, the equitable percentage ownership in those businesses for women, such that wealth can be created for the many and not just for the few. So but it has to happen with everybody's a willingness on behalf of everyone, and not just.
Thanks, Michelle. Turning to you, Monsieur Dassault, you run a huge engineering company. How much of a challenge is it to find a diverse workforce?
Diverse, the device?
Diverse.
What's that?
A workforce made up of underrepresented minorities. I mean, traditionally, engineering has been a very male field. Are you finding it easy to attract the right sort of women and ethnic minorities?
Ok. Je pense que de toute façon, l'aviation fait rêver. Donc, les jeunes qui font des études d'ingénieur frappent à notre porte. Et je dois dire que celui qui rentre après ses études reste toute sa vie chez nous. Ça, c'est une chose. Je voudrais revenir sur les bonnes remarques de monsieur le voisin quand même, parce que, oui, entre les piétons et les passagers de la voiture, forcément, on ne sait pas ce qui va se passer. Je rappelle juste, mais je pense que vous êtes au courant, qu'on a décidé d'interdire que des robots déposent des brevets. Donc, de toute façon, il y a un risque. On va pas revenir là-dessus, mais je pense que l'intelligence artificielle doit se développer peut-être gentiment, mais pas trop. En ce qui nous concerne, notamment pour nous aux avions, nous utilisons évidemment depuis longtemps le logiciel de Dassault Systèmes. Vous vous doutez que ça nous permet d'avoir à la fois une avance et la possibilité de faire des économies, car il y a quelques années, pour faire un nouvel avion, on faisait une maquette en bois à l'échelle 1 pour étudier le passage des câbles pour les prochaines séries. Et là, tout se fait au niveau des travaux de logiciels. Je peux juste citer aussi les voitures. Avant, on scratchait une centaine de voitures pour étudier les risques en fonction d'accidents. Et maintenant, tout se fait par ordinateur. Donc ça, c'est des gros progrès. Moi, je pense que de toute façon, il faut pas tout confier aux ordinateurs, mais il faut savoir s'en servir. Donc, pour répondre spécifiquement à votre question, oui, les jeunes viennent, les hommes et les femmes, on est très contents, et ils sont, dès le départ, mis sur des responsabilités importantes. On n'attend pas 5 ou 10 ans pour dire qu'ils vont participer à un prototype ou des choses comme ça. Et ça, c'est important aussi, c'est-à-dire de faire confiance.
Okay. Thank you very much, Monsieur Dassault. I think we could talk for much longer, but sadly we are out of time. So let me just thank the panel once again for all of your thoughts. Michelle Scarborough, Tarek Amin, Thierry Dassault, and Stéphane Malvoisin, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for you.